The scream pierced the afternoon air like a knife. "Help! Somebody help!" From the riverbank, Martha Williams watched in horror as her 6-year-old granddaughter Emma's head disappeared beneath the churning water. The spring floods had turned the usually gentle creek into a raging torrent. Time seemed to freeze as neighbors gathered, helpless against the violent current. Then came the sound of chains snapping with such force it echoed across the valley. A blur of tan and black fur launched from the hillside, a massive German shepherd racing toward the water with single-minded purpose. Without hesitation, Rex plunged into the murderous current, powerful legs driving against the force that had swallowed the little girl. No one could have predicted this moment 1 year ago, when that same dog had been labeled a menace, a dangerous animal the town had voted to destroy. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Martha Williams had lived in Riverdale for nearly 5 decades, but the last 5 years had stretched like an eternity. At 72, her weathered hands told stories of hard work, but it was the persistent sadness in her pale blue eyes that revealed her true burden. The accident had claimed both her husband George and her only son Michael in one cruel stroke, a head-on collision with a drunk driver on Route 7. Their absence had hollowed her out, transforming the once vibrant community pillar into a reclusive shadow who rarely ventured beyond her white picket fence. Her modest 2-story farmhouse sat at the edge of town, the peeling paint and overgrown garden the physical manifestation of her neglected grief. Neighbors had tried to help initially, bringing casseroles and offering companionship, but Martha's withdrawal had eventually discouraged even the most persistent well-wishers. Now, most people in town simply referred to her as the widow on Elm Street, their memories of her infectious laugh and famous apple pies fading with each passing season. Emma Johnson, with her unruly blonde curls and perpetually scraped knees, was Martha's only living connection to Michael. The 6-year-old was the spitting image of her father, the same dimpled smile and curious nature. But Martha rarely saw her granddaughter. Rachel, Michael's widow, had moved 3 towns over after the funeral, citing the need for a fresh start. The tension between the 2 women ran deep. Rachel blamed Martha for encouraging Michael to help his father with farm repairs that fateful day. Their interactions were limited to strained holiday visits, with Emma caught in the middle, sensing the discomfort without understanding its source. The rural community of Riverdale itself served as a character in this unfolding drama, close-knit, traditional, and wary of outsiders, whether human or animal. When the massive German shepherd first appeared at the edge of town, matted fur revealing protruding ribs and a suspicious gash across his shoulder, rumors spread quickly. Children were kept indoors. Some claimed he'd attacked livestock on the Jensen farm. Others whispered he might be rabid. No one approached him. No one offered help. The animal control officer had set traps, but the intelligent creature avoided them all, surviving on whatever scraps he could scavenge while maintaining a watchful distance from the humans who feared him. The November storm had descended on Riverdale with unexpected fury, driving sheets of icy rain against Martha's windows and roaring through the leafless trees surrounding her property. She had been making her nightly cup of chamomile tea, a ritual that rarely changed, when a crash from behind the garden shed sent her old heart racing. Clutching her flannel robe tighter, Martha debated whether to investigate or call someone. In the end, curiosity won over caution. Armed with only a flashlight and her late husband's baseball bat, she ventured into the deluge. The beam of light cut through the darkness, eventually landing on the upturned trash cans and scattered debris. As she moved closer, the flashlight illuminated 2 amber eyes reflecting back at her from beneath the shed's small overhang. Martha froze, her grip tightening on the bat. It was him, the German shepherd everyone in town had been talking about. Up close, the dog looked even worse than rumors suggested. Mud and blood matted his once beautiful coat, and Martha could count every rib protruding from his side. A deep gash ran across his shoulder, angry and infected. But what struck Martha most wasn't his size or injuries, but the profound exhaustion in those intelligent eyes. This wasn't a monster. This was a creature at the end of its rope. "You poor thing," Martha whispered, lowering the bat. The dog growled softly, backing further under the shed. He was clearly terrified, but too weak to run. Martha recognized the posture not aggression, but fear mixed with the last dregs of survival instinct. She had seen that same look in the mirror many times after losing George and Michael. "I'm not going to hurt you," she said, kneeling despite her arthritic knees. "You're safe here." Slowly, Martha retreated to the house, returning minutes later with a bowl of leftover beef stew and a towel. She placed them at the edge of the shed's overhang and backed away. The dog watched her suspiciously but didn't growl again. Martha sat on an overturned bucket several feet away, rain soaking through her robe, and waited. After nearly 20 minutes, hunger overcame fear. The shepherd crept forward, never taking his eyes off Martha, and began devouring the stew with desperate gulps. When he finished, he retreated again but remained visible, watching Martha with guarded curiosity. "You need help," Martha told him simply. "And so do I." That night, Martha made the decision that would change everything. She prepared the old mudroom off the kitchen, creating a makeshift bed from blankets and towels. It took 3 more bowls of food, offered at increasing proximity to the house, before the dog finally limped after her through the back door. He collapsed on the blankets immediately, too exhausted and injured to resist when Martha gently closed the door, separating the mudroom from the rest of the house. In the morning light, Martha assessed the situation more clearly. The dog needed a veterinarian, but she knew no local vet would treat the animal everyone feared. She would have to nurse him herself, a daunting task given his size and condition. She named him Rex, after her childhood dog, though she had no way of knowing if he already answered to another name. "You're safe now, Rex," she promised, not entirely sure he understood. But something in his eyes, a glimmer of hope, perhaps told her he might. News traveled quickly in Riverdale. Martha had barely finished treating Rex's wounds with her limited first aid supplies when her doorbell rang. Standing on her porch was Robert Taylor, the hardware store owner who lived 3 houses down, accompanied by Sheila Peterson from the town council. "Martha, we've heard you've taken in that stray," Robert said without preamble, his tall frame tense with barely concealed anger. "Is it true?" Martha had known Robert for 30 years. They'd served on community committees together, and he'd been one of George's fishing buddies. But something in his expression now made her hesitate. "He was injured and starving," Martha replied, not moving from the doorway. "What was I supposed to do? Let him die in the storm?" "That dog is dangerous," Sheila interjected, her thin lips pressed into a disapproving line. "There's been reports of it growling at children near the elementary school." "He was scared and hungry," Martha countered. "Wouldn't you be defensive if everyone who saw you immediately grabbed a stick or ran away?" Robert stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Martha, I understand you've been lonely since George and Michael passed. But this isn't the answer. That animal could turn on you in your sleep." Something in his tone, the condescension, the assumption of her fragility, sparked a fire Martha hadn't felt in years. She straightened her spine, all 5 foot 2 inches of her standing firm. "I appreciate your concern, Robert, but I've made my decision. Rex stays with me until he's healed. After that, we'll see." "Rex? You've named it already?" Sheila looked horrified. "On him," Martha corrected. "And yes, I have." The confrontation ended with thinly veiled threats about animal control and safety ordinances, but Martha remained unmoved. After they left, she returned to the mudroom where Rex lay watching the door, clearly having heard the entire exchange. His ears had flattened during the visitor's presence, and a low growl had rumbled in his chest. "Don't you worry about them," Martha assured him, carefully changing the bandage on his shoulder. "I may be old, but I'm twice as stubborn as I look." Over the next few weeks, a pattern emerged. Martha would treat Rex's wounds, feed him, and talk to him continuously in a gentle voice. In return, Rex gradually allowed her closer, eventually accepting her touch without flinching. His physical recovery was remarkable. The wound began to heal cleanly, and proper nutrition brought a healthy luster back to his coat. But trust came more slowly. Rex remained wary of sudden movements and loud noises. When Martha had visitors, which became increasingly rare as word spread about her new companion, Rex would retreat to the furthest corner of the mudroom, watching with suspicious eyes and occasionally emitting a warning growl that sent most guests hurrying to leave. Only with Martha did he show a different side. When they were alone, Rex would follow her from room to room, maintaining a respectful distance but always keeping her in sight. At night he would lie across the threshold of her bedroom, as if appointing himself her guardian. By the 4th week, Martha felt confident enough to venture into her fenced backyard with Rex off-leash. He explored the space cautiously, marking territory and investigating scents, but never strayed far from Martha. It was during one of these outings that Robert Taylor appeared at the fence, observing them with narrowed eyes. "Still harboring that beast, I see," he called over. Rex immediately positioned himself between Martha and the fence, his posture alert, but not aggressive until Robert took a step closer. Then the transformation was instantaneous, hackles raised, teeth bared, a deep growl emanating from deep in his chest. "Rex?" "No," Martha commanded firmly, surprised when the dog immediately responded, backing down though remaining vigilant. "You see that?" Robert pointed accusingly. "One word from me and he's ready to attack. That animal is a public menace, Martha, and you're putting yourself and everyone else at risk by keeping him." Martha studied Robert's face, noting the unusual intensity of his reaction. It seemed personal somehow, beyond normal concern. "He's protecting me," she replied calmly. "There's a difference, and he's getting better every day." Robert shook his head. "You can't rehabilitate his kind. Some animals are just born dangerous." As he walked away, Martha couldn't shake the feeling that Robert's hostility toward Rex stemmed from something deeper than community concern. But she had no idea how right she was, or how the truth would eventually come to light in the most dramatic way possible. The Riverdale Community Center hadn't been this packed since the 4th of July pancake breakfast. Folding chairs normally stacked in storage had been arranged in neat rows, every seat filled with concerned citizens. The emergency town meeting, called by Council President Sheila Peterson, had a single item on its agenda: the dangerous animal situation on Elm Street. Martha sat alone in the front row, her spine rigid despite the whispers flowing around her like poison. She had chosen to leave Rex at home, knowing his presence would only inflame tensions further. As the meeting was called to order, Sheila tapped the microphone and peered over her reading glasses. "As you all know, we're here to address a serious safety concern. For over a month now, Martha Williams has been harboring a feral German Shepherd that has been deemed dangerous by multiple witnesses. Despite numerous warnings, she has refused to surrender the animal to proper authorities." Martha felt the weight of dozens of stares on her back as Sheila continued, outlining alleged incidents, most of which were grossly exaggerated or completely fabricated. According to the council president, Rex had chased children, killed local wildlife, and displayed extreme aggressive tendencies toward anyone approaching Martha's property. When Robert Taylor stood to speak, Martha wasn't surprised. He'd appointed himself the unofficial leader of the opposition. "I've known Martha Williams for 30 years, he began, his voice carrying authority from years as a retired Army sergeant. "She's a good woman who's suffered terrible loss. But grief can cloud judgment, and this is clearly the case here. This animal is not a pet, it's a ticking time bomb." He produced a sheet of paper, waving it for emphasis. "I have here a petition signed by 47 residents demanding immediate action. We're asking the council to enforce Ordinance 15B, which allows for the removal of animals deemed a public threat." The crowd murmured in agreement, and Martha felt her heart sink. Nearly 50 signatures meant almost every household in Riverdale had turned against her. "If I may," Martha said, rising slowly. At 72, she stood barely 5 feet tall, but the determination in her voice commanded attention. "I've lived in this town my entire life. You all knew George. Many of you attended Michael's funeral. When I needed this community most, you were there for me." She paused, letting the reminder settle. "Now I'm asking you to trust me. Rex was injured and starving when I found him. Yes, he's cautious around strangers, but he's never once shown aggression toward me. He's healing both physically and emotionally." "And emotionally?" scoffed Robert. "It's a dog, Martha, not a person." "Animals feel fear and pain just like we do," Martha countered. "And they remember mistreatment. Whatever happened to Rex before he came to me left scars deeper than the ones on his body." Elderly Frank Wilson, who rarely spoke at meetings, cleared his throat. "I saw Martha walking that dog on a leash yesterday. Yep, perfect heel position. Didn't even look at my cats on the porch. Don't seem vicious to me." "One good day doesn't guarantee safety," argued Pamela Jenkins, the elementary school principal. "What happens when a child runs up to pet him without warning? Are we willing to take that risk?" The debate grew heated. Voices raised, accusations flew. Martha stood her ground as neighbors she'd known for decades demanded she prioritize community safety over her attachment to a wild animal. Finally, Mayor Thompson, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, raised his hand for silence. "I understand both sides of this issue. Public safety must be our priority, but compassion matters too. I propose a compromise. Martha keeps the dog, but must fulfill certain conditions: secure fencing, muzzle in public, liability insurance, and professional behavioral assessment." Robert immediately objected. "That's not enough. This isn't about conditions, it's about removing a threat before someone gets hurt." The ferocity in his tone made several council members exchange glances. His personal vendetta seemed disproportionate, even to those who shared his concerns. Martha looked around the room, at faces she'd known for years now twisted with fear and judgment. Only a handful met her eyes with sympathy. The community she'd loved had turned against her, and for the first time in her life, Martha Williams felt like a stranger in her own hometown. The next morning, a county animal control vehicle pulled into Martha's driveway. Officer James Cooper stepped out, clipboard in hand, looking distinctly uncomfortable with his assignment. At 60, he was closer to Martha's age than most county employees, with kind eyes that seemed at odds with his official capacity. "Morning, Martha," he said, removing his cap as she opened the door. "I expect you know why I'm here." Martha nodded, her expression resigned but determined. "You'd better come in, James. But I should warn you, Rex doesn't do well with uniforms." As if on cue, a deep warning growl emanated from the kitchen doorway where Rex stood, hackles raised, assessing the newcomer with wary intelligence. "Easy, boy," Martha soothed. "James is just doing his job." To the officer's credit, he showed no fear, though his hand instinctively moved closer to the tranquilizer gun holstered at his hip. "That's quite an animal you've got there." "He's a good dog who's had bad experiences," Martha replied, gesturing toward the living room. "Let's talk in here. Rex, stay." The shepherd immediately settled onto his haunches, still alert but obeying without hesitation. James raised an eyebrow, impressed despite himself. Once seated, he laid out the situation bluntly. "The council's given me orders to remove the animal for public safety reasons. There's a mandatory 10-day holding period then." He trailed off, but Martha understood the implication. "Then they'll put him down." James nodded grimly. "I don't like it either, but my hands are tied. There's the petition, the witness statements, and Riverdale ordinance is clear about dangerous animals." "He's not dangerous, James. He's protective. There's a difference." "Maybe so, but the law doesn't make that distinction." He hesitated, then added more softly, "Look, I've been doing this job 30 years. I can tell the difference between an aggressive animal and one that's been traumatized. Your Rex falls into the second category. But legally, that doesn't change anything." Martha leaned forward, her voice steady. "What if I could prove he's not a threat? Get a professional evaluation." "That would help, but the council's vote was pretty decisive." James glanced toward the kitchen where Rex remained vigilant. "I'm required to take him today, Martha." "I'm sorry." "And if I refuse?" James sighed heavily. "Then I'd have to call the sheriff. You'd be facing obstruction charges, possibly a fine. And they'd still take the dog." Martha felt tears threatening but refused to let them fall. "Can I at least have 24 hours? To say goodbye properly?" Something in her dignity moved the officer. He checked his watch, then his schedule. "Officially, I need to execute this order immediately." Then, more quietly, "But I have a busy day ahead. Lots of stops to make. Might not get back this way until tomorrow morning." Martha's gratitude was palpable. "Thank you, James." As he stood to leave, he paused by the kitchen doorway, studying Rex, who hadn't moved from his position, despite clearly tracking every word of their conversation. "You know," James said thoughtfully, "most aggressive strays don't maintain a perfect stay command for 15 minutes. That kind of training," he shook his head slightly. "This dog had a purpose once." After James left, Martha knelt beside Rex, running her fingers through his thick fur. "We've got one day, boy, one day to figure something out." That evening, Martha sat on her porch swing, watching the sunset with Rex at her feet. She'd spent hours on the phone calling every animal behaviorist and trainer within 50 miles, but none could come on such short notice. Tomorrow they would take him away, and there seemed nothing she could do to prevent it. "I'm sorry I failed you," she whispered, rubbing his ears. As darkness fell, Martha decided to try one last training session, hoping to capture Rex's good behavior on her old digital camera as evidence. She reached for her small treat bag and said clearly, "Rex, sit." The dog immediately complied. "Stay," she commanded, walking backward several paces. Rex remained motionless. "Come," she called, and he trotted forward obediently. Martha worked through basic commands, heel, down, leave it, all of which Rex performed flawlessly. Then, on a hunch, she tried something more advanced. "Rex, search." The transformation was instantaneous. The shepherd's entire demeanor shifted to alert professionalism. He began quartering the yard in a precise pattern, nose to the ground, moving with purpose rather than random sniffing. Astonished, Martha tried another command, "Rex, find." Immediately, Rex lifted his nose to the air, catching scents on the wind rather than the ground. His movements became even more deliberate, methodical. "My God," Martha whispered, understanding dawning. "You're not just trained, you're a working dog." On impulse, she called out in a panicked voice, "Help! Help me!" "Oh." Rex's response was immediate. He raced to her side, circling once, then sat facing outward as if guarding her from threat. When she coughed deliberately, he nosed at her chest and face, checking her breathing. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. Rex wasn't merely a pet someone had abandoned. His specialized responses, his intelligence, his wariness of uniforms, this was a highly trained search and rescue dog. Someone had invested thousands of dollars and countless hours in his training. Which raised the critical question, what had happened to make such a valuable, skilled animal end up abandoned and feared? The revelation gave Martha hope, but also deepened the mystery. As she led Rex back inside, she wondered whose commands he had originally followed and why they had discarded such a remarkable animal. More importantly, she wondered if this new knowledge might somehow save him from the fate that awaited tomorrow morning. What Martha couldn't know was that the answer to all her questions lived just 3 houses down, and that the truth would emerge in circumstances none of them could have predicted. Martha barely slept that night, her mind racing with newfound purpose. By dawn, she was at her old desktop computer, a relic her son had insisted she keep to stay connected. Now she was grateful for his persistence as she typed search and rescue dog identification into the search bar. The subsequent hours yielded a wealth of information that only confirmed her suspicions. German Shepherds were among the most popular breeds for search and rescue operations. Their intelligence, strength, and trainability made them ideal for finding missing persons in diverse terrains. The specialized behaviors Rex had demonstrated the quartering search pattern, the alert posture, the medical checking were hallmarks of professional training that typically required years to perfect. When James Cooper's animal control van pulled into her driveway at precisely 9 o'clock, Martha was waiting on the porch with a folder of printouts and her digital camera. "Before you say anything," she began as James approached, "I need to show you something." She played the video footage from the previous evening, narrating Rex's responses to each command. James watched with increasing interest, his expression shifting from professional detachment to genuine curiosity. "These aren't typical pet commands," Martha explained. "Rex is responding to search and rescue protocols. I've been researching all night. He must have been part of a professional team." James scratched his chin thoughtfully. That would explain a lot. His physical condition when he showed up, the awareness of uniform, something happened on a mission, maybe. "Exactly," Martha pressed. "And doesn't that change things? A dog with this training is valuable. Someone might be looking for him." "It's possible," James conceded. "But without identification, no collar, no microchip that we know of, it's hard to trace his origins." Martha sensed a slight opening and pushed forward. "What if I could find out where he came from? Would that buy us some time?" James sighed, looking torn between duty and compassion. "The council's decision is still binding, Martha." But he glanced at his clipboard. "I could report that I'm investigating a potential prior owner situation. Might delay things a few days." "That's all I'm asking for," Martha said, relief evident in her voice. "I'm not promising anything," James cautioned. "And this stays between us. If anyone asks, I'm still planning to take him, just waiting on some paperwork." After James left, Martha began her investigation in earnest. She contacted every search and rescue organization within a 100-mile radius, describing Rex and his specific training responses. Most conversations ended quickly. No one was missing a German Shepherd matching Rex's description. By mid-afternoon, Martha's optimism was fading. Her breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Harry Wilson, the town's elderly mailman, mentioned during his delivery that the neighboring county had suffered devastating floods 2 years prior. "They brought in search teams from all over," Harry recalled. "Dogs, handlers, the works. Messy business. Not everyone made it out." This new lead sent Martha calling the Westfield County Emergency Management Office. After being transferred multiple times, she finally reached Sarah Donnelly, who had coordinated volunteer efforts during the floods. "We did have several K-9 units," Sarah confirmed. "Let me check the records. Yes, there were 2 German Shepherds. One from the state police, still active. The other," she paused. "That's odd. The records show he was reported missing during operations, presumed drowned while attempting a water rescue." "What was his name?" Martha asked, heart racing. "Ranger. Belonged to the Mountain Valley Search and Rescue, handled by..." Sarah hesitated. "I'm not sure I should share personnel information." "Please," Martha urged. "This is important. I think Ranger might be alive." After a long pause, Sarah relented. The handler was Robert Taylor. He resigned from the volunteer unit shortly after the incident. Martha nearly dropped the phone. Robert Taylor, her neighbor, the man leading the campaign against Rex, had been his handler. The revelation was staggering in its implications. If Rex was actually Ranger, why would Robert deny recognizing his own dog? Why would he actively try to have him destroyed? The questions multiplied, but one thing was clear: Robert Taylor was hiding something significant, and Martha was determined to uncover the truth. The silver sedan pulling into Martha's driveway the next morning was so unexpected that at first she thought it might be another county official coming to take Rex. Instead, a slender woman in her mid-30s emerged, followed by a small girl with blonde pigtails. Martha's heart caught in her throat. "Rachel? Emma?" Her daughter-in-law approached tentatively, her expression a complex mixture of discomfort and resolve. "Hello, Martha. I hope we're not intruding." It had been nearly 8 months since Martha had seen them last, at a tense Christmas dinner where conversation had revolved around the weather and Emma's school projects, carefully avoiding any topics of substance. Of course not, Martha managed, though the surprise left her momentarily disoriented. "Come in, please." Emma hung back, partially hidden behind her mother's legs, studying Martha with solemn eyes that were so like Michael's it made Martha's chest ache. "Hi, Grandma," she said softly. Martha knelt, ignoring the protest from her arthritic knees. "Hello, sweetheart. My goodness, you've grown." As they entered the house, Martha suddenly remembered Rex. "Wait, I should mention I have a dog now. He's very well behaved, but large, and he can be wary of strangers." Rachel stiffened immediately. "A dog? What kind?" "A German Shepherd. His name is Rex. He's in the backyard at the moment." "Is he safe around children?" Rachel's protective instinct was evident in her tone. Martha hesitated, caught between honesty and fear that Rex's situation might drive them away before they'd even sat down. "He's never shown any aggression toward me, but he's still adjusting to people. I'll keep him separated for now." Once seated in the living room with coffee for the adults and juice for Emma, the reason for their unexpected visit emerged. "I've accepted a position at Westfield Medical Center," Rachel explained. "It's a significant promotion, but it means longer hours during the training period. I've been struggling to find suitable childcare for Emma this summer." She met Martha's gaze directly for perhaps the first time since Michael's funeral. "I know things have been difficult between us, but Emma talks about you all the time. And I thought perhaps if you're willing, she could stay with you for a few weeks, just until my schedule normalizes." The request left Martha momentarily speechless. After years of limited access to her only grandchild, being offered extended time with Emma seemed like a miracle. Yet she couldn't help wondering about the timing, especially given her current predicament with Rex. "I'd love that more than anything," Martha said carefully. "But I need to be honest about the situation here. The dog I mentioned, there's been some controversy in town about him. He was a stray I took in, and some neighbors think he might be dangerous." Rachel's expression darkened. "Dangerous? And you want Emma around him?" "No, that's not." Martha took a steadying breath. "I don't believe he's dangerous. In fact, I've discovered he's likely a trained search and rescue dog. But there's a complicated situation with his former handler, and the town council has ordered him removed." She explained her discoveries about Rex's probable identity as Ranger and the puzzling behavior of Robert Taylor. As she spoke, she noticed Emma had moved to the window overlooking the backyard, watching Rex with undisguised curiosity. "I understand if this changes your mind," Martha concluded, "but I wanted you to have all the facts." Rachel was quiet for a long moment, weighing her limited options against her maternal instinct to protect her daughter from any potential threat. "He looks sad," Emma's small voice interrupted their silent standoff. She was still watching Rex, who had settled under the maple tree, vigilant but calm. Rachel joined her daughter at the window. "What makes you say that, honey?" Emma shrugged. "His eyes. Like in that story you read me about the dog who lost his person." Something in the child's simple observation seemed to reach Rachel. She studied the dog for several minutes before turning back to Martha. "I still need childcare," she said pragmatically. "And despite our differences, I know you love Emma. If you promise to keep them separated until we're certain the dog is safe, I'm willing to proceed with the arrangement." Relief flooded through Martha. "I promise." "Thank you, Rachel. This means the world to me." After establishing that Emma would stay for 4 weeks, they discussed practical matters: school supplies for the fall, Emma's allergies to strawberries, her bedtime routine. Throughout the conversation, Martha noticed a subtle shift in Rachel's demeanor, a slight softening of the defensive posture she'd maintained for years. As they prepared to leave, Rachel would bring Emma and her belongings the following weekend. Martha ventured a question she'd held back for years. Rachel, may I ask why now? After all this time? Her daughter-in-law paused at the door, her expression vulnerable in a way Martha had never seen before. The truth. Rachel sighed. I've been seeing a grief counselor. She suggested that some of my resistance to your involvement with Emma might be misplaced anger about Michael's death, and that I've been unfair to you. She looked away, uncomfortable with the admission. I'm not saying everything's fixed, but I'm trying to do better, for Emma's sake. Martha nodded, too moved to speak. As they walked to the car, Emma suddenly broke free from her mother's hand and ran back to Martha, wrapping small arms around her waist. I'm glad I get to stay with you, Grandma, she whispered. Martha hugged her tightly, savoring the moment. Me too, sweetheart, me too. The first few days after Emma's arrival were carefully orchestrated to keep her and Rex separated. Martha would take Rex for long walks when Emma played in the front yard, and secured him in the mudroom during meals and indoor activities. From behind the glass door, Rex watched the child with intense curiosity but showed no signs of aggression. Emma, for her part, seemed equally fascinated by the dog. Why can't I pet him, Grandma? She asked repeatedly. He looks friendly. He needs time to get used to you, sweetheart, Martha explained. He's had some hard times that make him nervous around new people. On the fourth day, while Emma colored at the kitchen table, Rex began whining at the mudroom door, his eyes fixed on the child. Instead of his usual alert posture, his tail wagged hesitantly. I think he wants to meet you, Martha observed, making a decision. Would you like to try? You'll need to be very calm and follow my instructions exactly. Emma nodded solemnly, setting down her crayons. Martha brought her to the living room sofa and had her sit quietly, then went to retrieve Rex. She attached his leash, though she doubted she could physically restrain him if he truly wanted to lunge, and led him slowly to the living room. Hold out your hand, palm down, and let him sniff you, Martha instructed. Whoa. Don't make any sudden movements. Emma did as told, her small face a picture of concentration. Rex approached cautiously, his powerful nose working overtime as he gathered information about this new person. After a thorough inspection, he did something that brought tears to Martha's eyes. He gently placed his head on Emma's lap. He likes me, Emma whispered, awed by this sign of acceptance. Yes, he does, Martha agreed, watching as her granddaughter tentatively stroked the dog's head. Over the following days, a remarkable transformation took place. Rex, who had remained wary of every adult visitor, displayed nothing but gentle patience with Emma. He would lie beside her as she read books aloud to him, follow her around the garden as she explored, and position himself protectively near her whenever they ventured into the front yard. Martha observed their interactions closely, ready to intervene at the slightest sign of trouble, but Rex's behavior was impeccable. If anything, he seemed more relaxed in Emma's presence than he had been since arriving at Martha's home. He's a good dog, Grandma, Emma declared one afternoon as they watched Rex retrieve a tennis ball she had thrown. Why would anyone think he's dangerous? The question hit at the heart of the mystery Martha was still trying to unravel. She had made several more calls to the Mountain Valley Search and Rescue Team, gathering pieces of information about the flood incident where Ranger had allegedly been lost. The picture that emerged was fragmented but troubling. A teenage boy had gone missing. Ranger and Robert had been deployed to find him, and something had gone catastrophically wrong. The boy had been found deceased 2 days later. Shortly afterward, Robert resigned from the volunteer unit, claiming his dog had been swept away during the search. Yet here was Ranger, or Rex, as Martha still called him, very much alive and showing no fear of water. During their walks by the creek that bordered Martha's property, he would readily splash through the shallows, belying the idea that a traumatic water incident had occurred. I think Martha said carefully that sometimes people are afraid of things they don't understand. And Rex is a very special dog with a complicated past. Emma seemed to accept this explanation, but Martha knew the situation couldn't remain in limbo indefinitely. James Cooper had stretched his investigation as far as professionally possible, but pressure from the town council was mounting. She needed to confront Robert Taylor with what she knew, but doing so might trigger unpredictable consequences. What Martha couldn't have anticipated was that the confrontation would come not through her planning, but through a sudden crisis that would force the truth into the open in the most dramatic way possible. The spring rains had been relentless that year. 3 consecutive days of downpour had transformed the gentle creek bordering Martha's property into a swollen, churning channel of muddy water. Local news warned of flash flood potential in low-lying areas, and Martha had taken the precaution of moving items from her basement to higher ground. "The water's so big now," Emma observed that morning, her nose pressed against the kitchen window as she watched sheets of rain pelt the backyard. At 6, everything was still a source of wonder to her, even potentially dangerous weather conditions. "Yes, and that's why we're staying inside today," Martha emphasized, placing a bowl of oatmeal on the table. "The creek is not safe when it's like this." Emma nodded solemnly. "I promise I won't go near it." Martha had no reason to doubt her granddaughter's word. In the 3 weeks Emma had been staying with her, the child had proven herself remarkably responsible for her age, always following Martha's safety guidelines. Their days had fallen into a comfortable routine of indoor crafts, baking sessions, and supervised outdoor play in the yard with Rex, who had become Emma's devoted companion. After breakfast, Martha settled in to tackle the monthly bills, a task she'd been postponing. "I need to concentrate on these papers for a while, sweetheart. Why don't you color in your new book? Rex can keep you company in the living room." Emma readily agreed, delighted at the prospect of uninterrupted time with the dog. Martha opened her checkbook at the kitchen table, positioning herself so she could glance up periodically to check on her granddaughter. The rain drumming on the roof created a soothing background rhythm, and for a while everything was peaceful. The first hint that something had changed came when Martha realized she no longer heard Emma's voice chattering to Rex. Looking up from her paperwork, she saw the living room was empty, no child, no dog. The coloring book lay abandoned on the floor. "Emma," Martha called, rising from her chair. "Where are you, sweetheart?" No answer came. Martha moved quickly through the downstairs rooms, checking each one while calling Emma's name with increasing urgency. When she reached the mudroom, her heart sank. The back door was slightly ajar, rain spattering through the gap onto the tile floor. Martha rushed outside, uncaring that she wore only house slippers, scanning the yard for any sign of her granddaughter. The rain immediately soaked through her cardigan, plastering her gray hair to her skull. "Emma," she shouted above the downpour. "Emma, answer me right now." A movement caught her eye, a piece of bright yellow fabric snagged on the gate that led to the rear of the property. Emma's rain jacket. With trembling fingers, Martha unhooked it, her mind racing with horrible possibilities. The gate itself was unlatched, swinging loosely in the wind. Beyond the gate lay a sloping meadow that led down to the creek that now raged with rain-swollen fury. Terror gripped Martha's heart. Had Emma, despite her promise, been drawn to see the transformed waterway? Children were naturally curious, and the dramatic change in the usually placid creek might have proven irresistible. Then Martha noticed something else. Rex was missing too. Had he followed Emma, sensing danger? Or had she taken him with her deliberately, feeling safer with her canine protector? Martha pushed through the gate, calling desperately as she made her way down the slippery slope toward the creek. The muddy ground sucked at her slippers, threatening to topple her with each step. The rational part of her mind urged her to call for help, to get her phone, but primal fear drove her forward. Each second could be critical. At the bottom of the meadow, the normally modest creek had become a roaring monster, at least 15 feet wide, its banks overflowing in places. Trees that had stood safely on the shore now had water swirling around their trunks. Debris, branches, an old tire, even what looked like a garden shed rushed past in the current. Martha followed the waterline, scanning desperately for any sign of Emma or Rex. The rain had plastered her clothes to her body and cold seeped into her bones, but she barely noticed. Her entire being was focused on finding her granddaughter. "Emma," she screamed, her voice breaking. "Emma." A faint sound reached her ears, not a child's voice, but a dog's bark. Distant, barely audible above the water's roar, but unmistakable. Martha pivoted toward the sound, squinting through the rain. There, about 50 yards downstream, she caught a flash of movement on the opposite bank. It was Rex, barking frantically, running back and forth along the edge of the water. And next to him, a small figure in a bright red sweater, Emma, thankfully on her feet, but clearly stranded across the swollen creek. Relief that Emma was alive quickly gave way to new terror. The child was separated from Martha by a raging torrent, alone but for the dog. How had she gotten across in the first place? The creek must have risen further in the short time since she'd reached it, cutting off her return path. "Stay where you are," Martha shouted, praying Emma could hear her. "Don't move, sweetheart. I'm going to get help." Emma seemed to see her grandmother then, waving her arms and calling something that was lost to the sound of rushing water. Rex continued his vigilant barking, staying protectively close to the child. Martha turned to rush back to the house for her phone, but her wet slipper slipped on the muddy bank. She went down hard, pain lancing through her hip as she collided with the soggy ground. For a frightening moment, she couldn't move, the breath knocked from her lungs. When she finally managed to push herself up, her left leg nearly buckled beneath her. The fall had aggravated her arthritic hip, and each movement sent shards of pain through her body. Gritting her teeth, Martha forced herself to continue, using a fallen branch as a makeshift cane. Her progress was agonizingly slow, each step a battle against pain and the treacherous footing. It took nearly 10 minutes to reach the house, time that stretched like an eternity with Emma stranded across the dangerous water. Martha lurched through the back door, reaching for the phone with trembling hands. She dialed 911, her voice breaking as she explained the emergency to the dispatcher. "My granddaughter is stranded across Miller's Creek. The water's risen, she can't get back. Please hurry." The dispatcher promised help was on the way, but warned it might take time. "We've got multiple flood-related emergencies, Ma. Try to stay calm and keep visual contact with your granddaughter if possible." "Does she appear to be in immediate danger?" "Not yet," Martha managed. "But the water's still rising." After hanging up, Martha grabbed her raincoat and a flashlight. The skies had darkened prematurely under the heavy clouds, creating a twilight gloom despite the mid-morning hour. She was halfway back to the door when a sound stopped her cold, the sharp, distinctive crack of a chain breaking. Martha knew instantly what had happened. Rex, who had been confined to the backyard by a length of chain when not directly supervised, had somehow broken free. Her blood ran cold at the implications. If Rex had sensed Emma's distress and managed to break his restraint. She hurried back outside as quickly as her injured hip would allow, scanning the yard. The chain hung empty from the post where she'd secured it that morning. Deep gouges in the earth showed where Rex had strained against it until the metal gave way. Panic propelled Martha back toward the creek, though each step was agony. She had to reach Emma before something terrible happened. The dispatcher's warning echoed in her mind. Help would take time to arrive. Too much time. As she approached the creek once more, Martha was horrified to find the water had risen even further, and now flowing over sections of the bank where she had stood just minutes before. The roar had intensified, drowning out all other sounds. She could no longer see Emma or Rex across the water. "Emma," she screamed, desperation making her voice raw. "Emma." No answer came. Martha moved downstream, fighting through underbrush and branches, searching frantically for any glimpse of her granddaughter. The rain had finally begun to slacken, but the creek continued to rise, fed by runoff from the hills above. Then, through a gap in the vegetation, Martha saw something that stopped her heart. Emma, no longer safely on the bank, but in the water itself. The child clung to a partially submerged tree trunk, that had fallen across a narrow section of the creek, creating a precarious natural bridge. The water rushed just beneath her, tugging at her legs as she tried to maintain her grip on the slippery bark. "Hold on, Emma," Martha cried, though her voice couldn't possibly carry above the water's roar. "Please, hold on." Martha could see Rex now, too, standing at the edge of the water, barking frantically. The dog seemed to be trying to reach Emma, but hesitating at the creek's edge, perhaps recognizing the danger of the current. What happened next unfolded with such speed that Martha would later recall it only in disjointed flashes. Emma's grip on the tree trunk faltered. Her small body slipped, plunging into the churning water. Her red sweater appeared briefly, then vanished beneath the surface. Rex exploded into action. Without hesitation, the German Shepherd launched himself into the raging creek, powerful legs driving him through the current toward the spot where Emma had disappeared. For heart-stopping seconds, Martha could see nothing but muddy water rushing past. Then, about 20 yards downstream, Emma's head broke the surface, her arms flailing desperately. Beside her appeared Rex, swimming strongly despite the powerful current. The dog maneuvered himself beneath the child, pushing her upward, keeping her head above water as they continued to be swept downstream. Martha staggered along the bank, following their progress, shouting encouragement, though she knew they couldn't hear her. She could see Rex was struggling now, fighting both the current and the weight of the waterlogged child on his back. Yet he never faltered, never let Emma slip beneath the surface again. The creek made a sharp bend ahead, where fallen trees had created a natural catchment of debris. If Rex and Emma were swept into it, they could be trapped underwater by the accumulated branches and trash. But just before the bend, Rex seemed to gather his remaining strength, angling toward the shore with powerful, deliberate strokes. Martha watched in awe as the dog fought his way toward a slightly calmer eddy near the bank. With a final surge of effort, Rex reached shallow enough water for his paws to find purchase. He staggered the last few feet, Emma still clinging to his back, until they collapsed together on a narrow strip of muddy shore. Martha's cry of relief caught in her throat as she realized their ordeal wasn't over. The spot where they had landed was cut off from the main bank by a deep channel of fast-moving water and island created by the flood. Emma lay motionless beside Rex, who stood guard over her, shaking with exhaustion but still vigilant. Panic rose anew in Martha's chest. Emma wasn't moving. Had she swallowed water? Was she breathing? Martha couldn't reach them, couldn't help her granddaughter who might be dying before her eyes. "Help," she screamed, her voice breaking. "Somebody help us." As if in answer to her desperate plea, the sound of an approaching vehicle penetrated the storm's noise. Headlights cut through the gloom as a truck pulled up at the edge of the meadow. A tall figure emerged, moving quickly toward the creek. Robert Taylor, the last person Martha expected or wanted to see in this moment of crisis. "Martha," he called, jogging toward her. "The rescue team is right behind me. I heard the call on my scanner." Before she could respond, Robert's eyes locked on the tableau across the water, Emma lying motionless, Rex standing guard. His face went ashen. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Is that—" "My granddaughter," Martha confirmed, tears mixing with the rain on her face. Rex pulled her from the water, "but she's not moving. We can't reach them." For a moment, Robert stood frozen, staring at the German Shepherd across the water. Something complex and painful crossed his features, recognition, disbelief, perhaps even shame. Then, without another word, he stripped off his jacket and boots and waded into the raging current. Rex stood trembling on the small island of mud and debris, his powerful body pushed to its limits by the fight against the current. Despite his exhaustion, he maintained his protective stance over Emma's still form, amber eyes alert to any further threat. The water had left a visible mark of debris high on his chest, showing how deep he had been submerged during the rescue. But it wasn't until Martha noticed the crimson streaks washing down his left flank that she realized the true cost of his heroism. A jagged branch had torn through Rex's shoulder, leaving a gaping wound that pulsed with each labored breath he took. His thick fur, matted with mud and blood, partially concealed the injury, but the growing pool of diluted red beneath him revealed its severity. The very same shoulder that had once carried Emma to safety was now compromised, possibly beyond repair. Robert Taylor fought against the current, using a fallen tree as support while carefully navigating the treacherous channel. When he finally reached the muddy island where Emma and Rex were stranded, his approach triggered an immediate response from the injured dog. Despite his weakened state, Rex positioned himself between the newcomer and Emma, a deep warning growl rumbling from his chest. "Easy, boy," Robert said, his voice carrying a strange note of familiarity. "I'm here to help." The dog's reaction was immediate and shocking. At the sound of Robert's voice, Rex's aggressive posture faltered. His ears pricked forward in recognition, head tilting slightly as if processing conflicting information. The growl subsided, replaced by a high-pitched whine that seemed to convey both recognition and distress. Robert knelt beside Emma, checking for vital signs while keeping a wary eye on Rex. "She's breathing," he called back to Martha. "But she swallowed water. We need to get her to medical help immediately." As he gathered Emma into his arms, Rex staggered, his injured leg finally giving way beneath him. He collapsed onto the mud, blood flowing more freely now as the movement reopened his wound. His eyes remained fixed on Emma, even as his own strength ebbed away. "Rex is hurt badly," Robert shouted over the roar of the water. "That gash has hit an artery. He's losing too much blood." Martha watched helplessly from the shore, tears streaming down her face as she witnessed the terrible choice unfolding before her. Robert could safely carry one of them back through the dangerous waters, Emma or Rex, but not both. And with each passing second, the dog's chances of survival diminished as vital blood pumped from his wound. "Save Emma first," Martha called, her heart breaking with the knowledge that by the time Robert could return, it might be too late for the loyal dog who had sacrificed everything to save her granddaughter. Martha had faced many losses in her long life: her husband, her son, both years of estrangement from her only grandchild, but watching Rex's life drain away as he lay on that mud-soaked island struck a pain so acute it nearly brought her to her knees. But this noble animal had come into her life as a frightened stray, had faced the community's fear and rejection, had bonded with Emma when no one else believed in him, and now had given his very lifeblood to save a child he had known for mere weeks. The injustice of it burned in Martha's chest. If Rex died now, he would do so without vindication, his true nature recognized too late by the very people who had condemned him. The town would likely memorialize him as a hero, conveniently forgetting their petitions and accusations, their demands for his removal. As Robert struggled through the swirling water, Emma clutched tightly against his chest. The child remained unconscious, her face pale against the dark fabric of Robert's shirt. As he reached the shore, Martha's maternal instincts temporarily overrode her concern for Rex. She reached for her granddaughter, running trembling hands over Emma's face and checking her breathing. "She needs immediate medical attention," Robert panted, still catching his breath from the dangerous crossing. "But she's stable for now." Martha glanced back toward the island where Rex lay motionless, save for the shallow rise and fall of his rib cage. "And Rex? Can you go back for him?" The conflict on Robert's face was palpable. He looked from the injured dog to the approaching lights of emergency vehicles finally arriving at the edge of the property, calculating times and possibilities. "If I go back now, I might not be able to get him across," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion Martha couldn't quite identify. "And even if I did, without immediate veterinary care." He left the sentence unfinished, but its meaning hung heavy between them. The nearest emergency vet clinic was over 40 minutes away, even with clear roads. Given the amount of blood Rex had already lost, the chances of him surviving such a journey were slim. Martha felt something inside her break. After everything, to lose Rex this way seemed a cruelty beyond bearing. She reached for Emma's limp hand, finding cold comfort in the steady pulse beneath her fingers. At least her granddaughter would live, thanks to Rex's sacrifice. Robert stood silently beside them, water streaming from his clothes, his expression unreadable as he stared at the German Shepherd across the channel. Something in his gaze, regret, guilt, made Martha's grief momentarily give way to anger. "You knew all along, didn't you?" she accused, voice shaking. "He was your dog, Ranger. He didn't drown in those floods 2 years ago." Robert flinched as if struck, but his eyes never left the injured animal. "It's complicated, Martha." "What's complicated about abandoning a loyal animal who served alongside you? About actively trying to have him destroyed when he found his way to me?" The questions burst from Martha, fueled by grief and rage. "He's dying over there because of what he did for Emma. Let's give him the truth he deserves." For a moment, it seemed Robert might continue his denials. Then his shoulders sagged, the weight of long-carried secrets visibly pressing down on him. "You're right," he admitted quietly. "That's Ranger, my partner, his voice caught, my failure." The admission hung between them as the first paramedics rushed down the slope toward them. Martha surrendered Emma to their care, explaining the situation rapidly while emergency personnel mobilized a water rescue team for Rex. But as Martha turned back toward the creek, a fresh wave of despair washed over her. The small island where Rex had been lying was now almost completely submerged, the water having risen another critical foot during their exchange. The German Shepherd was nowhere to be seen. "Rex," she screamed, scanning the churning surface desperately. "Rex. Rex." Robert joined her frantic search, wading back into the shallows despite the rescuer's warnings. "Ranger," he called, using the name the dog would recognize from their years together. "Ranger." For several heart-stopping moments, there was nothing but the sound of rushing water and desperate human voices. Then, near a cluster of half-submerged bushes downstream, they spotted him, Rex's head barely visible above the surface, his body caught against a tangle of branches. He wasn't moving. Martha's anguished cry cut through the chaos as rescue workers rushed to reach the dog before the current could tear him away. Robert stood frozen at the water's edge, a complex tapestry of emotions playing across his face: guilt, grief, and something deeper that looked remarkably like shame. What none of them realized in that moment of crisis was that the tragedy unfolding before them would soon unearth truths long buried, and that Rex's sacrifice would ultimately lead to revelations that would change all their lives forever. The rescue team moved with practiced efficiency, deploying a swift water technician who navigated the dangerous current with a rescue line. Martha watched, barely breathing, as they secured Rex's motionless form and carefully transported him back to shore. The dog lay still on the muddy ground, his once powerful body seeming smaller somehow, diminished by injury and blood loss. One of the paramedics knelt beside him, checking for signs of life while Martha hovered nearby, hope and dread warring within her. After what seemed an eternity, the young woman looked up. "He's alive, but barely. His pulse is weak, and he's lost a significant amount of blood." "We need to get him to a vet immediately," Martha insisted, looking toward the ambulance where Emma was already receiving oxygen. "Please, there must be something you can do." The paramedics exchanged glances, clearly prioritizing their human patient. It was Robert who stepped forward, his voice carrying an authority that surprised Martha. "This is a certified search and rescue animal," he stated firmly. "Under state law, he's entitled to emergency medical transport and care." When the paramedic appeared skeptical, Robert reached for his wallet and withdrew an identification card. "Robert Taylor, Mountain Valley Search and Rescue. This dog is Ranger, my former partner. He deserves treatment." The admission silenced everyone within earshot. Martha stared at Robert, witnessing the public acknowledgement of what he had denied for weeks. More surprising was the immediate effect his words had on the rescue personnel, who suddenly viewed Rex or Ranger with newfound respect. "We'll stabilize him and transport him with the child," the lead paramedic decided. "County protocol permits emergency transport for working animals injured in rescue operations." As they worked to stem the bleeding and prepare Rex for transport, Robert stood apart, his expression haunted. When Martha approached him, he spoke before she could formulate her questions. "I owe you an explanation," he said quietly. "I owe him one, too." "Yes, you do," Martha agreed, her voice steady despite her emotional turmoil. "But right now, Emma and Rex need medical attention. The rest can wait." Robert nodded, then made a decision. "I'll follow the ambulance in my truck, meet you at the hospital." 3 hours later, Martha sat in the hospital waiting room, exhaustion etched into every line of her face. Emma had been admitted for observation, her condition stabilized. The doctors were optimistic about her recovery, though they wanted to monitor her for secondary drowning symptoms. Rex had been transported to a veterinary hospital 5 miles away, where he was undergoing emergency surgery. Robert entered the waiting room carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Martha and took the seat beside her, his movements betraying bone-deep weariness. "Any news?" he asked. "Emma's going to be fine," Martha replied, "thanks to Rex. Or should I call him Ranger?" Robert winced slightly. He was Ranger when I knew him. He seems to have accepted Rex as his name now. "Why, Robert?" Martha turned to face him fully. "Why pretend you didn't recognize your own dog? Why campaign to have him destroyed?" The question hung between them, heavy with accusation. Robert stared into his coffee cup as if it might contain the right words. "Because every time I looked at him I saw my failure," he finally admitted. "And I couldn't bear it." The story emerged slowly, delivered in the flat tone of someone recounting a nightmare they've relived too many times. 2 years earlier, during the devastating Westfield County floods, a teenage boy had gone missing. Robert and Ranger had been deployed as part of the search effort, tasked with covering a residential area where waters were rising rapidly. Ranger alerted near an abandoned building, Robert recalled. "He was trying to tell me the boy was inside, but I misinterpreted his signals. I thought he was indicating we should move on, that there was nothing there. We left to search another sector." His voice cracked slightly. "The boy was found 2 days later, in that same building. He'd sought shelter on the 2nd floor, but the waters kept rising. If I had listened to Ranger, if I had trusted his training instead of my own judgment, that boy would be alive today." Martha listened in stunned silence as Robert described the aftermath, his overwhelming guilt, his inability to face his failure, his decision to report Ranger as missing in action, swept away by the floodwaters. "I couldn't look at him without seeing my mistake," Robert confessed. "So one night I drove him to a rest stop 50 miles away and left him there. I told myself someone would find him, that his training would make him valuable to someone else, that he deserved a handler who wouldn't fail him." Tears welled in Martha's eyes, imagining Rex Ranger abandoned by the person he trusted most, confused and alone in unfamiliar territory. That's why he was so wary when he finally found his way to Riverdale, she realized. He'd been betrayed by the human he relied on. Robert nodded, shame evident in every line of his body. "When he showed up in town, I panicked. I was afraid he'd approach me, that people would realize he was my dog, that questions would be asked. So I became his loudest critic, hoping no one would make the connection." "You tried to have him destroyed," Martha said, the enormity of this betrayal still difficult to comprehend. "Your own partner." "I convinced myself it was mercy," Robert whispered. "That he'd be better off, but that was just another lie I told myself. The truth is, I was a coward. I couldn't face what I'd done." As painful as Robert's confession was, Martha could see it offered only a partial explanation. "But today," she pressed, "when you saw him on that island with Emma, something changed." Robert's expression shifted, a complex mixture of grief and something like wonder. "When I saw him standing over your granddaughter, protecting her despite his own injuries, I realized the truth. Ranger never failed that day during the floods. I failed him. I failed to trust what he was telling me." He rubbed a hand across his face, suddenly looking years older. "Today he did exactly what he was trained to do. He saved a life at great risk to his own. He's a better soul than I could ever hope to be." Martha absorbed this revelation in silence. Her anger toward Robert remained, but it was now tempered with understanding. They had both lost so much, she to circumstances beyond her control, he to his own tragic mistake and subsequent cowardice. Yet somehow Rex had brought them to this moment of truth. "What happens now?" she finally asked. Before Robert could answer, a nurse appeared in the doorway. "Mrs. Williams, your granddaughter is asking for you, and she's very concerned about a dog named Rex." Martha rose, steadying herself on the chair as her arthritic hip protested. "I should go to her." "Martha," Robert said, stopping her with a gentle hand on her arm. "I called the veterinary hospital while you were with the doctor. Rex is out of surgery. The vet says it was touch and go, but he's stable now. The next 24 hours will be critical, but they think he's going to make it." Relief flooded through Martha, weakening her knees. "Thank God." "I've arranged to cover all his medical expenses," Robert continued. "It's the very least I can do." Martha studied him, seeing genuine remorse in his eyes. "That's a start," she acknowledged. "But there's something more important you need to do." "Name it," Robert said without hesitation. "When Rex recovers, and he will recover," Martha stated with fierce determination, "you need to make things right with him. He deserves to know you didn't abandon him again today." Robert nodded, the weight of accountability settling visibly on his shoulders. "I will, I promise." As Martha turned to go to her granddaughter, Robert added softly in Martha, "Thank you for giving him what I couldn't, a home where he was valued, where someone believed in him." The words followed Martha down the hospital corridor, echoing a truth she had recognized from the beginning. Sometimes faith in another being, human or animal, that is the most powerful gift we can offer. And sometimes that faith is rewarded in ways we could never have imagined. The following weeks unfolded with a measured pace of healing, both physical and emotional. Rex remained at the veterinary hospital for 7 days, his recovery closely monitored by a team that had come to view him as something of a celebrity. The local newspaper had run a front-page story about the heroic German shepherd who had saved a child from drowning, complete with quotes from the emergency responders who had witnessed his bravery firsthand. By the time he was cleared to return home, the same community that had once feared him now celebrated him as a local hero. Martha had converted her rarely used dining room into a recovery space for Rex, with a comfortable bed positioned where he could see both the front door and the backyard through adjacent windows. His injured shoulder would require weeks of limited movement, followed by careful rehabilitation, but the prognosis was positive for a full recovery. Each morning, Emma would sit beside him, reading aloud from her favorite books while gently stroking his good shoulder and seemingly understanding the quiet comfort her presence provided. Robert Taylor became a regular visitor, initially uncomfortable and awkward around both Martha and the dog he had abandoned. His first encounter with Rex, after the rescue, had been tense, the German shepherd regarding him with wary recognition, neither welcoming nor openly hostile. Martha had watched their careful dance around each other, understanding that trust, once broken, required time and consistent proof to be rebuilt. "I've been thinking," Robert said one afternoon as he and Martha sat on her porch swing, watching Emma throw a ball for Rex, who was now allowed short periods of supervised outdoor time. "The town needs a proper search and rescue unit. We've relied on county resources for too long, and as we saw with Emma, minutes can make the difference in an emergency." Martha studied him thoughtfully. "And you'd be involved in this?" "I would," Robert nodded, a new resolve evident in his bearing. "I've already spoken with Sheriff Davis. He agrees it's long overdue. We could train local volunteers, establish protocols for different emergency scenarios, especially with the creek flooding nearly every spring." "And Rex?" Martha asked the question that hung between them. Robert's expression softened. "If you're willing, and when he's fully recovered, Rex could be our founding member, our mascot and training model. He's already proven himself more capable than any of us." For the first time since the dramatic rescue, Martha saw a genuine purpose in Robert's eyes, not the haunted guilt that had driven his previous actions, but a commitment to honor Rex's gift by ensuring others could benefit from it. It was perhaps the most fitting tribute to the dog's courage and loyalty. "I think," Martha said carefully, "that decision should be Rex's." By midsummer, Emma had returned to her mother's care, though with a new arrangement that included regular weekends with Martha. The near tragedy had catalyzed an unexpected healing between Rachel and her mother-in-law, the shared terror of almost losing Emma putting years of strained relations into perspective. "I was wrong to keep her from you," Rachel admitted during one of their now frequent phone calls. "Michael would have wanted you in her life. I was just so angry about losing him. I needed someone to blame." "We both lost him," Martha replied gently. "Perhaps we can help each other remember him now instead of grieving separately." The town of Riverdale had undergone its own transformation. The petition that had once circulated demanding Rex's removal had been replaced by a community fundraiser to establish the Riverdale Search and Rescue Training Center. Robert had donated land at the edge of town, and construction was underway for a facility that would serve not only their community but neighboring counties as well. Most remarkable was the change in Rex himself. The wary, defensive animal who had arrived at Martha's door that stormy November night had evolved into a confident, balanced dog with an unmistakable sense of purpose. When Robert introduced him to search and rescue training exercises, Rex responded with an enthusiasm that confirmed what Martha had suspected all along: this was what he had been born to do. On a golden September afternoon, Martha sat on a bench outside the nearly completed training center, watching as Robert guided Rex through a complex search pattern. The dog moved with fluid grace, his injured shoulder fully healed, his focus absolute as he quartered the training area with methodical precision. Emma sat beside her grandmother, her small legs swinging beneath the bench. "Rex is the best dog in the whole world," she declared with the absolute certainty of a 6-year-old. Martha smiled, her heart full as she observed the unlikely family they had become: a widow who had lost everything, a child who had reunited her with hope, a man seeking redemption for his greatest mistake, and a dog who had somehow brought them all together. "Yes, he is," Martha agreed, watching as Rex successfully located the training subject hidden among the trees. His joyful bark of discovery echoed across the field, a sound of pure satisfaction that spoke of a creature who had found his place in the world. Robert joined them, his face flushed with pride as Rex trotted happily at his side. "He hasn't lost a step," he reported, bending to ruffle the dog's ears affectionately. "If anything, he's even better than before." "That's because he knows he's home now," Martha observed quietly. "Really home." As the autumn light gilded the scene in warm amber tones, Martha reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a simple act of compassion on a stormy night. She had opened her door to a frightened, injured animal, never imagining how that single decision would ripple outward, touching and transforming so many lives, including her own. Sometimes she thought, watching Rex lean contentedly against Emma's legs, the truest heroism lies not in dramatic rescues or public acclaim, but in the quiet choice to shelter another being when the world has turned its back. And sometimes that choice returns to us multiplied beyond measure, in ways we could never have foreseen. In the autumn of our lives, we often believe our greatest contributions are behind us. Martha's story reminds us this simply isn't true. When she opened her door to a frightened, injured dog everyone else had abandoned, she could never have imagined how this single act of compassion would transform so many lives, including her own. Age had not diminished her capacity to change her world, it had deepened it. Her wisdom to see beyond appearances, her courage to stand against judgment, and her unwavering belief in second chances created ripples that healed broken hearts across generations. This is the profound truth: our most meaningful impact can come at any age, especially when we choose compassion over fear, understanding over judgment, and connection over isolation. Like Martha, you possess the extraordinary power to shelter another being when the world turns away, and in that simple, brave choice may lie your greatest legacy. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.